Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 179 of the Comic Watchers Show. I'm your host, Matt Meyer, and with me, as always, is Chad Burdett. We are very pleased to welcome back Mr. the one and only Mark Russell to the show. He's got Billionaire Island, Cult of Dogs, Traveling to Mars, and you might just see the third issue of Superman Space Age coming soon, and about 100 other awesome things. Mark, how the heck are you, sir?
Oh, doing great.
Doing great. Okay. He's a man of few words. He chooses to let the page speak for him.
I get paid by the word, so
And I gotta tell you, you're. I'm gonna just open this with flattery and see how far it gets me. But you're one of those writers out there, man, that I always check out the new Mark Russell project, and yet Traveling to Mars, the third issue of which came out this week, completely flew under my radar. I'd read about it, and it's through this kind of up and coming publisher called Ablaze. So I think maybe a lot of folks may not as be familiar with it. What's the elevator pitch on that?
It's about the first manned mission to Mars, and the guy who gets to go is terminally ill because that way they don't have to bring him back. And so it's really just about his regrets and his life as he's gone on his one-way trip to Mars, and about what awaits him when he gets there. That's it in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it, obviously, than that, and there's a lot of things that go on that I don't want to spoil. It's not just 120 pages of a guy sitting on a spaceship, drinking Tang, but yeah, that's the gist of it. And I'm glad you brought up
Did I see
that I kind of flew under the radar, because I think this is because it's with a smaller publisher, Ablaze.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of stores aren't carrying it on, unless people ask for it in their pull box. So this is one of the things I want to the things I like to say when I go on podcasts now is like, if you want to read Traveling to Mars, and in my opinion, it's one of the best things I've ever written. You probably got to go to your comic book store and ask them to put it in your pull box, because they're probably not ordering a ton of them just to be sitting on the shelf.
So, as I've read the first 3 issues of Traveling to Mars, it has your typical social commentary, which there's some really, really smart things happening there, and with your usual wry sarcasm and observational humor. But what struck me about this is the tone is a lot more. I don't necessarily want to say it's a downer, because I think people should read it, but it's got a lot more pathos to it than a lot of your other stuff.
I think that's a good observation. I think it is. I wouldn't say it. I mean, it is sad at times, but I wouldn't call it a downer so much as I'd say it's deeply personal. It's something which I think is much more reflective in something. And one of the reasons why I went with a smaller publisher is just because they were going to let me just tell the story my way. I didn't have to worry about page turns and, clever transitions or space battles or anything. I could just tell a very human story the way I wanted to tell it. And so in a lot of ways, it's one of the most, intimate things I've ever written.
Sure. One of the core themes of Traveling to Mars is regret and facing the end of your life and looking back and just questioning, what did I accomplish? Did I matter? Talk about that a little bit, if you could.
Yeah, I think that this is kind of the question that, awaits us all towards the end. And I think even before the end, I think we're probably better off to be asking ourselves that as we go. And I think that what he realizes is that it's really kind of futile to think of yourself in terms of accomplishments, that none of us are really just the sum of trophies and accomplishments, that what we are is basically the sum of everyone who's loved us. What we are is the ripple we've created through the universe, through our relationships, and through, how much the things we are leaving behind meant to us. And I think that this is explored in pretty great detail. And also, it's a lot of it is just my chance to sort of say a lot of things that I personally think, my own sort of personal philosophy on life, through the mouth of Roy, because I have a lot in common with Roy. I grew up kind of redneck, as did Roy, and I feel like in a lot of ways I wasted a lot of time, doing dead end jobs and not really focusing on the things that mattered to me. And I hope that people out there who maybe feel the same way will realize how much the life they have left and how much the things they are doing that maybe they aren't going to get a trophy for, but that mean a lot to other people, how much these really truly do matter.
Chad, jump on in, man.
Oh yeah. So was there anything else that kind of inspired the story, and what kind of said, I want this story to take place in space?
Yeah, well, the other sort of major source of inspiration, other than like a guy in a tin can getting a chance to think about his life for once, because that's kind of what I feel like as a writer. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm on a mission to Mars in my head, and it's giving me the peace and the time to actually think about life for once. But beyond that, I wanted to do a story about like how the Earth kind of like is nearing the end of the cycle of this civilization, and unless we start thinking of like alternative ways to fuel the planet, alternative ways to exist as a society, we're probably going to be like the Earth is in this case, just sort of an addict scrambling for the last vials of energy, rather than thinking about quitting or thinking about the future.
And did I see correctly that this is going to be an 11-issue series? Or I think you made the comment on Facebook today.
Yeah, that's right. 11 issues.
That's a
total of
number.
220 pages.
Okay. That's interesting that you got it mapped out to 11 rather than
it didn't really
10 or 12 or traditional.
It wasn't
12.
like I set out and said it's got to be 11 issues. It's more like
right.
Yeah, this is one of the advantages of working with Ablaze is they just kind of let me go to the point where it ended, which is amazing, because usually when you write a series you got already all these artificial constrictions. It's like it's a 6-issue series and each issue is 22 pages, whereas each issue in this is 20 pages long, but I they let me go until the story was over, which was nice.
That's pretty freeing. With the Blaze being a newer, more upstart company, I guess that sort of outside of the box anarchic attitude, if you will, probably suits them a little bit. Like, hey, look what we're doing that other people aren't.
I think it's really good to be in that position where you can break the mold a little bit and do titles that other people aren't doing. I think that's what the advantage the small publishers really have, if they choose to exercise it, is that they can tell the stories that other publishers, that the big two, can't, because they're constricted by the fact that they know they've got to make 100,000 readers happy every month,
right?
And that's another one of the reasons why I tend more to work with smaller publishers. I still work for DC and Marvel every chance I get,
sure.
but a lot of my creator owned titles are like Ahoy or Ablaze
Vault.
or AWA Vault.
Yeah, I was fixing to say, you clearly have a great relationship with Tom Pyre and Ahoy, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But you have other projects kind of floating in the ether in various stages of completion or near completion or development, I guess, that could potentially be found at Ablaze.
Well, not at Ablaze. I mean, I would love to work with them again. They've been great, but I don't have anything in the pipeline with them right now. Although I've got a few things floating around that I think they might be good for. I'm working on a what I want to be a graphic novel, probably about the same length as a Traveling to Mars, but it's a fantasy novel, and it's about a sort of a trust fund kid, like a privileged young man who accidentally turns himself into a donkey during a magic trick that goes wrong, and then he has to experience the world not as like this this rich kid, but as like a pack mule, and he sees the world from a very different angle. It's based loosely on the 2nd century AD novel The Golden Ass, which is one of the few novels written in Latin which has survived to this day. But I would be setting it more of sort of a medieval sword and sandals type universe, and including a lot of my own little stories and stuff. So that's something I'm looking for a publisher for. So that might be good for Ablaze. And I also have another title coming with AWA, who published Not All Robots. It's called Rumpus Room, and it's about a billionaire who locks people who sort of are problematic for him in his rumpus room. And one by one, he has them crushed and turned into this really magnificent facial cream, like the best facial cream you can get. But he does, he's not like a complete bastard. He does allow them to like vote on who the next person to be crushed into face cream is going to be. So, and Ramon Orzanas is doing the art on that, and that should come out later in 2023.
That's exciting. Now, based on your description, it feels a little more Ahoy than AWA. But,
it's a very Ahoy-ish title.
Yeah.
One of the things I write. But yeah, this one's going to AWA. I feel like I need to give Ahoy a rest sometimes because I lean on them so heavily.
Right. Hey, give some other people a chance here. That's funny though. Because you've got My Bad and the sequel to Billionaire Island, and presumably the threequel to Second Coming is coming pretty soon, right?
That's right. Yeah,
I think I read that.
Yeah, the third season of Second Coming comes out in April through Ahoy, and it's about, I don't know if you read Second Coming, Only Begotten Son, the second volume, but it ends with Sunstar and Sheila having a baby. And so the third volume sort of picks up where that left off, and it's primarily about the dangers of living with a superpowered baby. And and of course, it's something Jesus can also relate to, because he was a superpowered boy himself in his first trip to Earth. And it's about learning to sort of like about how maturing is kind of like learning that your potential for hurting other people and harming the world, and reining that in. So that comes out in April, and I feel really good about it. The art that I'm getting from Richard Pace and Leonard Kirk are beautiful, just beautiful artwork. They're really hitting it out of the park on this one. So I'm really excited for that. And then I've also got, as you mentioned, My Bad, which I'm co-writing with Bryce Ingman, with art by Peter Krause. And colors by, what's that?
Oh, it's just kind of musing, the great Peter Krause.
Oh yeah, I probably always have to preface it with the great with the great Peter Krause. But yeah, I know he's been a perfect artist for this too, because he takes it so seriously. And I think it's really sort of the soul of the work, is that it's this sort of bizarre satiric thing that the art takes completely seriously. That to these people, they're not a joke, No.
This man has a chandelier on his head, damn it. And you will fear him.
If you were a vigilante hero who owned a lamp company, that you would too. But yeah, we're doing the second season of that, and then the second season of Billionaire Island, which is called Billionaire Island: Cult of Dogs, which tells the story of the aftermath of the first volume, when Business Dog is left as the richest single being on the planet. He's now worth $10 trillion. And there's all these abortive attempts to kidnap Business Dog from his lair on Billionaire Island.
Yeah,
now we'll be getting any more cereal monsters.
Yeah, well, the cereal monsters are, the entire book is completely written and drawn. But I think Ahoy is going to do a Kickstarter or somehow they're waiting till later in the year to release it, however they release it. But it's all in the can. The book is complete.
Billionaire Island, the first volume, was probably one of the most incisive satires and commentaries you've ever written. I mean, I feel it stood very, very well on its own, and you should be very proud of that work, because I mean, you deserve all the praise that book's gotten. And Steve, of course, too. Coming up with a sequel, there's some natural progression from the first story, but it feels like it's leaning somewhat more into the absurdity of the entire idea of even having a billionaire class. Was that the intent?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of ways the volume, the second volume, is sort of a deconstruction because it's more just about like, well, what the hell just happened, and how did we get to this ludicrous point where it's like everybody, like so much of the world's wealth was concentrated on this artificial island, and in most of it, owned by a dog. How did this come to pass? And so a lot of it, the story is told by the musings of this billionaire who survived the destruction of Billionaire Island and is now like Robinson Crusoe. His Armani suit is all frayed and torn up, and he's like trying to escape the island alive. And it's a lot of it's just sort of his musing about what went wrong, and at the same time, Shelley Bly, who is the journalist and the main character of the first series, is trying to is like interviewed the heir to the Bel Canto fortune, and is trying to escape the Bel Canto campus and the area around there to get back to Miami to tell the story that she's discovered. So it really kind of, like the first volume, tells a story from two different angles that converge at the end.
But what possible lessons could we take away from the ongoing saga of Billionaire Island, Mark?
But a lot of it is about like, well, how we're sort of human shields for the billionaire economy, about how, yeah, the billionaires, made these stupid bets and crashed the economy, but it's everybody else ultimately who pays the price. It's the people getting their homes foreclosed. It's the people who now have to like live in an abandoned shopping mall, and also the role that like social media has played in sort of paralyzing us with conspiracy theories and sort of false information. So it is much more expansive. It kind of surveys the food supply that went into creating, this reality of the ecosystem in which a reality like Billionaire Island can exist.
Chad, you want to jump
in?
So,
yeah. Honest, just to be honest, I'm kind of behind on Billionaire Island, but any fun, I guess, jags on cryptocurrency?
There is a cover where Steve drew one of the best covers in the series. So the homeless guy holding out his cup, and someone's dropping like a crypto coin with like the face of Business Dog into his cup.
What is it that you feel leads you to write in kind of the milieu that you do with observations and social commentary? I mean, you're hardly the first guy to do it, but in terms of comics, I feel like you've carved out a really, really unique niche for yourself as sort of the social conscious of comics. And I say that the first issue of One Star Squadron just about moved me to tears. So keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, but it's a unique and unlucrative niche.
And I think I told you this before, that the Sinestro You're the Villain story you wrote was like, it was a Sinestro story, but there was a whole lot, there was that deeper, thought-provoking, those thought-provoking moments.
Well, thanks. Yeah, there are the people who write and read because they want to know what's going on. They want to add to their Talmudic knowledge of the DC universe or the Marvel universe. And I'm not criticizing them. We all, read for our own reasons. But it's never really been that attractive to me to write just about the characters or just to fill in the gaps of people's knowledge about the characters or to create little accessories to their knowledge about the characters. What I really want to do is use the characters for a conduit to tell, tell serious science fiction stories or to tell parables about our world. So I always want the characters that I approach and the properties that I work with to be sort of a gateway to the world as we experience it or the world that as it could be.
Well, and I mean, kind of looking at it from that perspective, clearly not all robots really touched all the right nerves with all the right people. I mean, you and Mike hit on some really, really big, just nasty toxicness that's going on with the public discourse, with regards to what constitutes masculinity. I mean, who gets to decide that? What is, et cetera, et cetera. And you got an Eisner for it. So congratulations on that.
Oh,
And I
thanks.
believe
Yeah, congrats.
Yeah.
Which is weird because it was the pitch that nobody wanted.
Well, I have to say it was, I try to stay on top of this stuff as best a 42-year-old dad of 3 can do. But like I had to do a little reading as to what the not all men stuff was all about, because it really hit me out of nowhere. And then once I did start reading, I was like, oh, these are really gross people. And now we have the robots, and I guess there's a sequel coming from AWA.
Yeah, well, we're talking about one. It's not
Okay.
finalized yet. We haven't like completely greenlit one, but yeah, there's one in the planning that would sort of pick up where the last one left off. But yeah, it was to me like a first and foremost, although it became much more as I started writing. It started out as like just sort of a parable for toxic masculinity,
Sure.
and about how people are sort of weaponized against each other because we are resentful at the fact that we've been reduced to economic functions like the robots have. The robots resent the humans because they have to support them, because only robots can have the jobs now. And the humans live in utter terror of the robots, who might go crazy at any moment or malfunction and kill them. And it's not a healthy way to live. And
Right.
yet it reflects so much of our, relationships, in relationships, especially between, men and women in society, that I think the remedy, as I kind of talk about in Not All Robots, is to stop allowing ourselves to be forced into economic roles that allow us to resent each other.
I know there's no magic cure-all, but how do you propose? Sorry, my dog is being noisy. Lucy, hush. What's Chad? Take the next question.
I think a dog wants to ask.
Next question. Yeah. Well, I just want to say about Not All Robots. I think one of my favorite, besides the covers, which were gorgeous, and especially the one that's the Need from Want remake, or the homage, I guess, is the opening scene where the robot is to be a human. When you're writing, those scenes, is there a certain, I guess, frame of mind you have to put yourself in, or to get the dialogue to flow how you want it to?
What I try to do, especially in scenes like that, where it's sort of talking heads talking about what's going on, is I try to have one person who's sort of like my voice, one person who's like asking the questions that I would ask in that situation. Like, isn't this crazy? How can we possibly, be allowing this? And to me, that's kind of what allows it's sort of what uncorks the ketchup, because then I try to think about, well, what somebody would say to that, or what, people are saying in response to the fact that I just find this absurd and nutty. And then as a rule, I try to like put people's positions and their beliefs in as few as word as possible. Because I think if you can say something as succinctly and as, pithy as way as possible, one of two things happens. Either becomes like incredibly ludicrous and therefore funny, or it becomes profound. And I think that's the way I sort of understand the world. It's like, well, let's put this in its basic and its most elemental way possible, and then see where the problem is.
I mean, obviously there's no shortage of things to observe and lampoon. Do you ever feel like, though, like you run the risk of feeling like you're just that one guy shouting from the mountaintop?
Old man shouting at cloud. Yeah.
Exactly.
I feel that way a lot. And who knows, maybe I am. But I don't shout because I imagine people are listening. I shout more just because I feel like this is just what I have to say. It's more for me. It's more for my own therapy and peace of mind than it is thinking, oh, well, the world will benefit from my insights, surely. But, I'm glad, and I feel really lucky to have this job when somebody does respond to it, when somebody does say that moved me, or that I'd never thought about that way before until I read that. Then I feel like that's a bonus, that I've made this connection to a person, or that somebody is starting to think about things because of something I wrote. But I wrote primarily just because it's what I have to say, without any real expectation of it changing anything.
If it weren't for comics, what do you think the outlet for that might be?
Well, I originally thought I was just going to be writing like novels and maybe nonfiction books. In fact, I'd written a couple books before I got into comics, but once I started writing comics, it became clear to me that this is really the medium on which my brain waves operate kind of the best, because I can allow the pictures to do as much of the storytelling as possible, and keep and really just focus on the dialogue and the plot. And it really is a medium. Plus, the other thing I really like about comics is that while it's a visual storytelling medium like film or TV, it's not nearly as expensive. So you can get away with taking chances because you don't have to answer to focus groups or high-powered executives looking over your shoulder, making sure you're not wasting their $10 million. Because the stakes are so much lower in comics, you can take some risks. You can tell some stories that otherwise probably wouldn't see the light of day.
I mean, I think one of the first things of yours that I read was God is disappointed in you. And I haven't read the Bible the same way since. Let me just tell you.
Well, that's good.
but I no, right. And it's good because it was a very frank and great interpretation. But how was it? You said you wrote some novels before comic books. How was it? Making that transition.
I thought it was actually went really easily. I thought it was really good because the comics, what it did was it allowed me to take all the parts I hated writing, which is creating the scene, describing what people are wearing or what they look like, and just hand that off to an artist. Or, I'd write that to an artist, but then people wouldn't have to see my belabored descriptions of like what people look like or what, cities look like. And I can just focus on what I actually want to do, which is talk directly to people about what I think or tell the stories I want to tell. So I felt like, when I started writing comic scripts, like a great weight had been lifted off my back.
A little bit freeing in that regard. Now, you bring up artists, and I think any writer would kill for the murderer's row of talent that you just kind of keep working with. I mean, we've got Steve Lieber, Steve Pugh, Deodato, so
Dave
many
Wachter.
more, and
Mike Allred.
Yeah, Mike Allred. Both Allreds. I mean, man, how do you just keep attracting all this top tier talent, my dude?
Well, a lot of it is luck.
And now, I mean, credit where credit's due, because as we started off here talking about Traveling to Mars, Roberto Melli, excuse me.
Yeah, he's great. That. I think he's a real undiscovered talent, and I hope he gets some, Conan the Barbarian or Avengers title or something after this, because he is really just nailing the art. And I'm really happy with working with him and what he's brought to the series. And yeah, like I said, a lot of it for me is just luck, because when I started writing comics, I didn't really know any artists or, who would be good for what. And so a lot of it was Marie Javins at DC, who was my editor back then when I started doing the Hanna-Barbera stuff, who could just find artists. And nobody, I think, at the time when I started writing the Flintstones would have thought, oh, well, Steve Pugh would be great for this, because, they knew him mostly from Animal Man and superhero stuff. But it was such a magical choice, because he not only was able to like draw these Stone Age characters and animals with amazing depth and humanity, but he sort of instantly got my sense of humor. So he knew how to draw funny without stepping on the lines. Like he knew when to sort of like engage the gag and draw people really doing really ridiculous things, and when to sort of like let the line just sort of do the work and draw somebody in a more deadpan pose. And to this day, one of the most fateful things that's ever happened to me was like being paired with Steve Pugh on the Flintstones, because we worked on so many projects after that, precisely because, you know, he just sort of instinctively gets what I'm trying to do. And I think he works on kind of the same wavelength. So in my early part of my career, I was lucky to get paired with a lot of great artists. Now, some artists later on, I had to sort of campaign for, like Mike Allred on Superman Space Age was somebody I've always wanted to work with. I loved his art. And when it got greenlit, my editor, Brittany Murphy, asked me to just make a list, like a bucket list, basically, of artists who I'd want to draw this. And she would do the same. And then we would compare notes. And Mike was the only name that appeared on both our lists. So we thought, well, it's a 1 in a million shot, but let's ask him. And it turned out he was available. So that was, again, just mind blowing to me. Again, a testament to the power of luck and its force in my life.
So you touched on Flintstones, which was, you know, more from the beginning of your comics career. And that just briefly got me thinking about Prez, which unfortunately never got to finish. Do you feel like there's ever going to be a chance that DC will publish the latter 6 issues of that series? Or
no, probably not. I never wrote them, and at this point, I don't know that I'd want to go back. I feel like a lot of the ideas I had for that have been sort of like filleted and used in other projects.
Gamed out. Okay.
If they did come back to me and say, we want to finish Prez, I would be open to it, but it would have to be a completely different, you know, ending to what
you've grown as a writer. The world has changed since then. I totally get that.
Yeah. But I would
Superman Space Age. Ongoing or continuing your love affair with DC. Although you did have that really cool Blade one shot from Marvel recently, which I wish that at least
that. When I read that, you know, and a lot of people were contacting me saying, "How is this not a series?" And I kind of like saw it when I read it, you know, for the first time as a reader. I thought, you know, they're right. This is actually just the beginning of a story. So I have since pitched like a limited series about Blade and as the sheriff in the Vampire Kingdom to them. We'll see if it gets made, but there is a pitch out there to turn it into a limited series.
Fingers crossed. But before I sidetracked myself, Superman Space Age, the first couple issues been out for a minute now. Issue 3 comes out in 2 weeks, you say? And it's the big finale. This is a little bit of a different take on Superman. I would than you've written elsewhere. It's still clearly Superman and your Superman, but the overall tone of Space Age is really one that, to me, seems to be exploring fatalism and whether or not you can maintain optimism in a world that determines to just stomp on it at every turn. Is that kind of where you've been going with this? Like, break down your thought process on Space Age a little bit.
Yeah, that's actually a really good synopsis, what you just gave. But yeah, I think part of it is that it dovetails in with, you know, Crisis on Infinite Earths. So this is a universe, one of the universes that doesn't make it. One of the universes that's destroyed in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And Superman knows early on in the story that this is what's going to happen, that the universe that this Earth is in will be destroyed, and there's nothing he can do about that, which is, again, one of the reasons why that Superman and the backstories of the characters is a little different than the canonical DC, you know, origin stories and stuff. But, you know, it really is an examination of like, well, what does it mean to be Superman when it's ultimately all for nothing? What does it mean to do anything when, you know, it will all ultimately end in oblivion? And to me, it's really just about like, we don't do this again because we expect to win. We do this because this is who we are. And that's sort of the answer Superman comes up with, is like, this is just who he is, and that whether or not people live or die or it works or fails, he wants to be the kind of person that it was worth living with during the time that we existed, to make the universe a place worth living for how long it lasts.
Sure. Such an interesting premise, and again, it gets into toying with being a downer, kind of like traveling to Mars, but not if you don't let it be one. Does that make sense?
I feel like it, it actually, when you read the whole thing, it's a very optimistic book. And I feel like there's a lot of things that people reading it will ultimately come away feeling much better about life and much better about their role in the world, having read the whole thing. But yeah, it goes to some pretty dark places too, because it's about the destruction of a universe.
Now these are pretty, I would say, meaty books, because they're like 80 pages each. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's three.
Was it in
what's that?
What I was going to say, was it originally, slated to be like in the, that, I guess, 3 sections, or was it like supposed to be a longer mini maxi series?
Yeah, well, when we were first pitching it, it was going to be like sort of an ongoing, where it would be, or I guess a maxi series would be a better description, where it was going to tell the story of like Superman from like 1965 to 1985, each issue being a year in the series. So it'd go for about 20 issues, each issue focusing on a different year in sequence. And it was going to be part of the whole 5G thing. And this was going to be the 2G Superman and that. But when the whole 5G plan sort of was nixed, blown up, they were still interested in doing this, but that format wasn't going to work anymore. So they pitched the 3 sort of prestige books, 80 pages each, instead of the 20 issue maxi. And I think it works really well like this. Red is kind of like a story in 3 acts, each act being a decade from when Superman becomes Superman to the end of the world and Crisis on Infinite Earths.
I just want to see it in an omnibus.
Oh, sorry, Chad. Go ahead.
I said I just hope they put it out like in an omnibus hardcover, oversized.
Oh, I'm sure they're already. I'm sure they've already got it designed.
It will be a trade. Obviously, I would love the hardcover omnibus, though, the full hardcover omnibus treatment, and I think they'd be crazy not to. Of course, that's just me.
Oh yeah. Well, man, yeah, most definitely. Laura Allred's colors just look so great on that slick paper. I mean, they always look great, right? But on that really just high grade paper for awesome stuff.
I will say that.
Were there any?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. Please.
In the 3rd volume, there is like a double page spread, where Mike is like drawn this double page spread, and Laura has colored it, and there's so many different things going on, and so many characters on the same page, that to me it feels like the comics equivalent of like and I don't want to be too pretentious, but fuck it, this is what I feel like it's the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in like comics form. It's just amazing to me. And yeah, I would love to see it get full, hardback glossy paper treatment.
Yeah. Someday an absolute edition and larger print.
Absolute. That's what I meant to say.
Is that what you're trying to say?
That would be great.
You fool, you're fired. Were there any particular challenges to pacing with regards to each issue being 80 pages?
I mean, the hardest part really for me was cutting down, which sounds like 80 pages. You shouldn't have an issue with cutting down. It should be more about filling it. But for me, it was the opposite. The problem was cutting down. So I wanted to put in all these subplots and sort of interweaving characters and that I just didn't have room for. So I had to cut a lot of it out. I think on the bright side, it's made the story very tight. but there were just all these sort of like subplots and moments that got left on the cutting room floor, which I kind of like. I wish I had. Maybe if they did a deluxe edition later, I'd put them in. But yeah, that was the big challenge to me. It was just like not being able to include as many sort of like side plots and background characters as I wanted.
Well, and with regards to the plot feeling tight, like it doesn't feel, each issue doesn't feel like 80 pages when you're reading it, and I mean that in a good way. So yeah, whatever your intent, it seems to have paid off.
Yeah, I think that generally it works better when you go that way. When you have too much and you have to condense down, you generally end up with better stories than when you go the opposite way, where it's like, oh geez, I got to fill 10 more pages. I guess, throw an extra splash page there, or have a walk and talk.
You can always feel when that's happening.
Yeah.
So I get it. I'm so relieved that the decompressed plotting fad has mostly faded away. Because you get these comics that, it's a good 22 pages, but I just read it in 3 minutes. So
yeah, I think that
you feel like you're getting less bang for your buck.
I feel a little cheated if I pay $4 for a comic and I feel like 20 pages were just sort of the characters treading water, and then there's like a twist at the end. It's like, oh great, now I gotta buy the next one that's going to tread water for 20 pages, and then give me another twist at the end, or a cliffhanger. It feels like like I'm being manipulated, and I'm sure like readers are wise to that. So I try to like writing put as much value on each page as I possibly can, have something worthwhile to like sort of lay my heart out on each page, and not to rely upon things like cliffhangers and twists to keep people interested.
So what writers helped mold you in that regard?
Well, I think most of the writers I've always really admired. Most of them never worked in comics, although I also, like everybody, the most cliche sort of thing you could say is like, I loved Alan Moore's work, and I loved Sandman, and of course Dark Knight Returns. I read the classics of like late 80s, early 90s comics, and it was what convinced me that comics were fundamentally a literary medium. But personally, in terms of my style and the people that sort of made me want to write, and I think sort of informed the sorts of things I think about, I would go more to like, Kurt Vonnegut, or maybe like James Thurber, or maybe Tom or Charles Dickens. I think that, or the indie comics people. I think Dan Clowes and Linda Barry have an influence on my work. So I think that most of my influences, of all my influences, only a very, very few were actually writing in the genre of like comics, and fewer still in superhero comics.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And now that you mentioned Vonnegut, I can see a lot in your writing. Were you ever fortunate enough to get to hear him speak while he was still alive?
Not like in person.
I mean,
we are contemporaries. Okay. I was an adult when he was around. I probably, if I had made it a point, probably could have at some point, but I never did, unfortunately. I did. One of the highlights of my literary career was I was invited to give a talk at the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. After God Is Disappointing You came out, I used to do like a PowerPoint show where I did the entire Bible in a 20-minute PowerPoint show. And I was invited there, and they took me on a tour as a guest through the house. And I saw, where Mark Twain, read books. I saw where, they took me up to his writing room where he would write, and showed me like his like antiquated typewriter that he had, and his desk. And he had a little pool table in his writing office, and they had a velvet rope that wouldn't let you go too far into the office. And I asked, it's like, it'd mean a lot to me if I could just have my picture taken behind Mark Twain's writing desk, because he's, again, just a literary hero of mine. And they said, I'm sorry, but no one could go past the velvet rope. They said, because we did used to let people go back there, but then Garrison Keeler, while we let him back there, he picked up one of the pool balls off the table. And because that pool table's so old, the pool ball just turned to dust in his hand, just destroyed one of Mark Twain's pool balls. So since then, they had erected rope, just this velvet rope to separate the rest of the office. And I was like, oh, well, I understand. I wouldn't touch anything, but I completely understand. And then they felt a little apologetic about it. They said, you know what? As long as you go back there with one of us, we'll let you back there. So I did get a photo of myself behind Mark Twain's desk, but I was extremely careful, not to like put my elbows on it or like pick up his quill or anything like that. They would have a Mark Russell.
When you're writing, do you have like a special place where you go to get into the zone, or kind of you can do like just wherever it moves?
There's two places where I do most of my writing. One is the library, just because it's super quiet and they have really good combination of like natural and artificial light, the library by my house. And then the other place is the local bar, because I'm a regular there, so they know that I'm writing, to just sort of leave me alone. In fact, when I go in, I'm such a regular that I don't even have to like order an iced tea. They'll just bring me an iced tea as soon as I show up, and then like ask me if I want lunch or something. And if I say yeah, then they'll and I have the whole menu memorized, so I'll just tell them what I want for lunch. But they don't mind if I stay there for like 3 or 4 hours just writing, even if I'm not buying anything. So that's nice. But I think those are the kind of places I like, places where I'm being left alone, in places where I can just sit there and write and not be distracted by people that I know, or the TV or the refrigerator, places. So it usually helps if I leave home to write.
Yeah, everybody has their own zone. Like, I know I read at some point, I'm sure this isn't unique to him, but like Stephen King has a rented office space, just his desk for writing, and things of that nature.
It really helps to have a place separate from where you live to work. I think, because it puts you in a different mindset.
I think a lot of people that aren't writers, or perhaps just aspiring writers, don't realize like it's work. You've got to have a singular focus as best you can.
Yeah, you sort of have to create artificial boredom. You kind of have to like put yourself where you're cut off from all your entertainments and sort of distractions of everyday life, and just force yourself to look at the page.
Yeah, most definitely. So looking bigger and broader, I wanted to talk to you about the Northwest Museum of Cartoon Arts. And Chad brought this up earlier to me, and he says, Matt, we should probably talk to Mark about this deal, because he's on the executive team of this.
Yeah.
So what's up with that, man? Tell folks about why one more reason that they should go to Portland.
Yeah, no. And Portland seems like a perfect place to have it, because so much of the talent here is here. And
they
have so many like relics from the history of comics and cartoon arts already here in Portland. So yeah, we're looking in 2023 to get a startup location, just sort of a pop-up, just sort of a proof of concept that might not be our permanent home, but to get a brick and mortar place where people can come in and see a lot of the exhibits that we've gathered. And also it's going to be not just like a museum where you go and look at things on the wall and then leave once you get hungry. It's going to be a living museum where there's going to be an artist in residence who will be in there like creating comics during the day. There's going to be like interactive exhibits for kids and people who want to like take a shot at making their own comic while they're in the museum. It's really just going to be sort of a temple to the cartoon arts and comic books, and allowing and showing people how easy and how gratifying it is to like just get in and make a comic book.
Is Scott McCloud going to live
and you
there?
guys are doing.
Scott McCloud will probably like squat in like a in the boiler room or something, and you might see him wandering around in his bathrobe periodically.
Yeah. Chad, go ahead.
I was going to say, and you guys are running a lot of fundraisers, correct? You run eBay auctions, and I think a while ago you mentioned a possible Kickstarter or something.
Yeah, we're going to have at least one Kickstarter coming up to fund the museum, and we've got the community has been very generous with donating artwork and all kinds of things. Some of which is going to be auctioned, some of which will become the rewards in the Kickstarter. So yeah, 2023 we're going to be doing a lot of fundraising to ramp up to fund the pop-up location, and then also to fund later, what we hope will be our permanent home.
I can't tell you, as a lifelong comics fan and reader, like just how much hearing that this thing is happening means to me. And probably, I'm sure I'm not alone, but as nerds before being nerds were cool and they took over pop culture, like just that sense of legitimacy to the arts. Like, we knew about it, we knew it was cool, but now we're getting to this space where through either this museum or through popular culture, i.e., every other movie that comes out now, it seems, like the greater public is finally catching up to us, and they're like, hey, this is the real deal. These nerds know what they're talking about. Where do you feel that do you feel like we might hit a saturation point with comics in general, with the mass public? Are we just going to keep going up for a while and continue to gain legitimacy? I mean, what do you see coming down the pike?
Well, I think there might be a saturation point in terms of superhero movies, just because people, will want to see different genres of movies. Yeah. But I don't think there's any saturation point for comics as a medium, because you can tell any kind of story in comics, and in fact, you can get away with telling stories in comics you can't tell in any other medium. So they'll always be relevant, and there'll always be this need for visual storytelling that doesn't cost like $20 million to make. So I think that comics, the thing that I think that comics, it makes it so important to the culture at large, is that vibrant cultures, I think, are cultures where the art and the culture is created from the ground up. It's the people on the streets busking, playing at the Cavern Club, or drawing on the sidewalk and turning it into comic books. Those are the people that create the cultures that are growing and changing and doing new and exciting things. Mm-hmm. It's a top-down culture might have a good opera, or they might have a good, ballet. But if it's the elites coming up with what you're going to watch in here, it's probably going to be a pretty boring culture.
Yeah. Well, it's just another form of gatekeeping.
Yeah. And it's going to be the things that, like, large donors want to see and hear, which is generally what they know they already like. Whereas when you have regular people on the streets just creating things that, for whatever reason, this is what I got to say to the world, for whatever reason, I like this, and no one else might like it, but I do. That's when you start finding all these different options. And that's where people start realizing that they're part of a club that they never knew existed, because someone else likes this crazy thing that they thought they were just making for themselves. And to me, that's what makes a culture worthwhile.
Yeah. Wow. That's actually like incredibly profound. I don't think I can top that. Chad, what do you want to dare to follow up that?
Oh, I was just going to ask. I was just going to ask if we had something coming up from you where you write and draw it, because I know you. I've seen you dab with sketches.
Yes, funny you should say that. Speaking of Kickstarters and stuff, I'm probably going to kickstart my own book of cartoons. Just I'm not a great artist. They would never let me near a professional comic book doing the interior art, but I like drawing cartoons, and I got my own little style. and so I'm going to be publishing a book of my own cartoons called Bunk Bed Mishaps, and probably going to kickstart it in March or April.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. I love that. And
if you want to see a guy struggle with his art, this is the place to be. But no, I to me, this has been like sort of my own sort of personal therapy over the last 20 years, just like drawing these cartoons that I have no idea what they're about or why I'm drawing them, but I seem compelled to do it anyway.
Pretty funny. Well, Chad, do you have?
Oh,
muted. I'm not muted. I thought I was muted. Chad, do you have anything else?
Did Deadbox, is that still? Did the most recent issue just come out also?
Yeah, it will. It is coming out. We're going to finish with a different artist, but yeah, look for announcements from Vault very soon. Things are happening with Deadbox. The last 2 issues will come out.
Well, that's good because that, God, I mean, as prolific
Peter Kowalski is taking over on the art.
Okay.
Peter Kowalski is taking over on the art, but I've seen some of his preliminary drawings and they just look fantastic. And yeah, so the last 2 issues will come out.
That's awesome. That's good. I hate it when anything goes unfinished out there. But Mark, thank you, so much for just everything that you bring that's unique and fresh to comics and just literature in general, because comics are literature. So, and
absolutely,
again, part of that legitimizing is getting people to understand that. It's like, just because there's pictures doesn't devalue it compared to War and Peace, or whatever novel. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for recognizing that and for having me on. I've had a good time as always.
Dude, we'll have to do it again.
Social media.
There's too much stuff coming out. So,
and where can we find you on social media?
Yeah.
I'm at Twitter, at least for the time being. I don't know how much longer I'll be on Twitter, but at Manrus, MANRUSS. Also on Instagram at the same handle, and on Hive at Mark Russell.
Awesome. The man, the myth, the legend, Mark Russell. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And thank you all for listening. We will be back with another great episode in 2 weeks of the Comic Watcher Show. Until then, get out there, support your local comic book shop, support local art, get out there, read something cool, and above all else, be good to each other. Thank you so much.